Hi everyone, it's Daniel here. Hope you're studying hard for the microeconomics exam tomorrow. And I just thought I'd help by going through a few questions. The public goods questions came after the end of the tutorial, so I thought I'd go through questions 1 and 4 with you just to help you in case you were having trouble with them and to assist you prepare for the exam. So if you have a look at the questions that came up after week 12, the public goods questions. The first question, as you can see, is about the City of Adelaide running a variety of weekend entertainment events, mostly targeted at families with children. And the first part of the question says, what is the marginal social benefit curve for these events? And show this on a clearly labelled diagram. Okay, so how do we work out the marginal social benefit curve? Well, as you'll remember, the marginal social benefit is going to be equal to the sum of everybody's marginal private benefit. So what's the marginal private benefit in this case? Okay, well, we've got 100 households with children, each of whom have a marginal private benefit of 20 minus 2q. So each individual household with children has a marginal benefit that is 20 minus 2q. So if the quantity is 1, for example, their marginal benefit 20 minus 2 is going to be 18. And also, there is another 100 households without children that value these events a bit less. Remember, the entertainment events are mostly targeted at families with children. So if you don't have children, you don't value it as much. The marginal benefit for those families is going to be 10 minus q. And it goes on to tell you the marginal cost of providing each event is $1,200, and they have quite a large capacity, and they're pure public goods. So again, the question asks, what is the marginal social benefit curve for these events? And if we're going to add up what the marginal private benefit for each of the households is, well, how are we going to do that? Well, imagine, as we've got here, the marginal benefit for the families with kids is going to be 20 minus 2q. 20 minus 2q. And I've got written here, I've just done an Excel spreadsheet where I've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10 of different quantities, and I've written the marginal benefit with that equation, 20 minus 2q. So for example, with a q of 1, the marginal benefit is going to be 20 minus 2 times 1, which is here, so you're going to get a marginal benefit of 18. Similarly, if the quantity is 5, then the marginal benefit for a family with children of 5 events is going to be 20 minus 2 times 5, in other words, 10. And I've also done below the equation for the families without children. Remember, each household without children values the event with a marginal benefit of 10 minus q. So marginal benefit of 10 minus q. So their marginal benefit is going to be 10 minus q, in this case 9 if the quantity is 1. And so we have a list of marginal benefit against the quantity here, families with children and families without children. So if we want this marginal social benefit, we're going to have to add up all the individual marginal private benefits. So what's that? Well, we have 100 families with children with marginal benefit is 20 minus 2q, and 100 families without children with a marginal benefit of 10 minus q. So we're going to have to add up the sum of the marginal private benefit for the families with children and the sum of the the sum of the marginal private benefit of the families without children. So what's the total marginal private benefit for the families with children? Well, if one household has a marginal benefit of 20 minus 2q, then 100 households are going to have a marginal benefit of 100 times that. In other words, 2,000 minus 200q. Right, 2,000 minus 200q, just being 100 times the marginal benefit for one household with children. And similarly, the marginal benefit of 100 households without children is going to be 100 times the marginal benefit of one household without children. So it's going to be 100 times 10 minus q. Remember, we got the marginal benefit from this part of the question here. Marginal benefit of a family with household without children values these events at 10 minus q. So 100 households like that is going to be 1,000 minus 100q. Okay, so now we have the marginal benefit for all of the families with children and all of the families without children. So how do we get the marginal social benefit? Well, we have to add these together. You're going to add 2,000 minus 200q to 1,000 minus 100q. So if you add them together, you're going to get 3,000 minus 300q. That's going to be the marginal social benefit for all of these households, the 200 households, including the 100 with children and the 100 without children. So for any particular any particular quantity, you can work out what is the marginal social benefit going to be. And I've done an equation here. So that's 3,000 minus 300 times the quantity, which is the equation that we got in the end, 3,000 minus 300Q. But you'll also notice that it's just adding up what is the marginal benefit for 100 households without children plus the marginal benefit for 100 households with children. It's just the same as working that out individually. Excuse me. So the marginal social benefit curve is going to be given by the equation 3,000 minus 300Q. So it then says show this on a clearly labeled diagram. And so below I've drawn the diagrams for the marginal benefit curves, including the marginal social benefit. So you'll see the marginal social benefit that comes from the graph of, I'm just wondering if I can show you where the data comes from. Yes, you can see. I won't. Anyway, you can probably take my word for it. Maybe I'll just try one more time. If I can have a look in here. No, I don't think. Oh, yes, here it is. So you can see the values are coming from these H17 to H26. That's this part here. That's just the marginal social benefit of what we'd written before. So the curve is this blue line here, and on the x-axis is quantity. Now, one thing that's very bad about this clearly labeled diagram is that it doesn't have the axes labeled, so it doesn't have the price labeled on the vertical axis, and it doesn't have the quantity labeled on the horizontal axis. And in your exam, you should make sure that you have your price clearly labeled. So this should be, for example, price in dollars, and this should be quantity in terms of number of events. But bearing that in mind, the marginal social curve for these events is given by this blue line. And I've got as well the marginal benefit of the families, the 100 families with children, and the marginal benefit of the 100 families without children. You'll notice it's lower, as well as the marginal cost. So part B asks, what is the socially optimal quantity of these events? What's the socially optimal quantity of these events? You'll remember that the socially optimal quantity is going to be where the marginal social benefit is equal to the marginal social cost. In other words, the benefit to society of producing one more is the same as the cost to society of producing one more. Well, we can see where the marginal social benefit is going to be. It's going to be this blue line here, and the marginal cost, as it's given in the question, is $1,200. So every extra event, $1,200, $1,200, $1,200. So the cost to society is going to be $1,200. So the socially optimal quantity of these events is going to be where the marginal social benefit equals the marginal cost. In other words, a quantity of 6. A quantity of 6. Okay, so that's this point here on the diagram. Part C asks, how many events would there be? Oh, by the way, before I get on to Part C, there is another way you can solve this. If you didn't want to just look at your diagram and say, hey, it's where these two lines intersect. There's a way you can solve this by calculating it. And that is, as I said, the socially optimal quantity is going to be at the point at which the marginal social benefit equals the marginal cost, right? Or in other words, marginal social benefit equals the marginal social cost. And the marginal social cost is going to be $1,200. So you could just make your equation for the marginal social benefit equal $1,200. So if we go back to our equation, we can just say $1,200 is what the marginal social benefit needs to be. And remember, our marginal social benefit equation was 3,000 minus 300Q. So if we just say 1,200 equals 3,000 minus 300Q, then we can say, move that across, we say 1,800 equals, and move this across, 300Q. In other words, Q equals 6, as we had before from looking at the diagram. So now moving on to Part C, it says, how many events would there be if the market were left to provide them? Show on your diagram. And remember, this is a pure public good, as it says in the question. There's a big enough capacity that they're pure public goods. So what that means is, if any one family provides it, then it's available to everyone. Everybody can access the event if any one family provides it. So what's the marginal benefit for any one family? Now, is any family going to provide it? Well, let's have a look. Well, the maximum possible marginal benefit for a family without children is only $9 worth, right? That's you don't get a higher marginal benefit for a family without children. So they're probably not going to provide it. What about the families with children? Well, even the families with children, the households with children, only have a maximum marginal benefit of $18. So if you're a family with children and you're going to get $18 of benefit from providing this, from paying for this event, and the event's going to cost you $1,200 to put on, are you going to pay for that event? Clearly not, right? Clearly not. You're not going to pay $1,200 for something that you're only going to get $18 worth of value back from, if you're rational. So, because even the families with children only value the event at $18, they're not going to pay the $1,200 to put the event on, and so in a free market, nobody, if the market was left to provide them, nobody would pay for this event. So there would be no events run if in that case. Part D says, how many events would there be if all the families with children go together and decided to provide them? Show on your diagram. Okay, so if all the families with children go together and decided to provide them. So now we want to say we're coordinating the 100 families with children. So remember, their marginal benefit, the marginal benefit of the 100 families with children from these events is 2,000 minus 200Q. That's 100 times each individual one of 20 minus 2Q. Okay, so what we're now looking for is to find where the marginal benefit for the 100 families with children intersects the marginal cost. In other words, they're going to produce where the benefit to them equals the cost to them. So this looks from our diagram like it's going to be a quantity of 4. And you can see again how to work this out with a calculation. If you know that the marginal cost is $1,200 and you know that the marginal social benefit has to equal the marginal cost, or rather the marginal benefit of the 100 families with children has to equal the marginal cost, and you know the equation for the marginal benefit of the 100 families with children, then you can make that equation equal to 1,200. So if we say, okay, we know the marginal benefit has to equal the marginal cost, and that's going to be 1,200, we say 1,200 equals 2,000 minus 200Q. In other words, move the 200Q over here, make it positive, 200Q equals, and the 1,200 goes over here, makes it negative, 2,000 minus 1,200, in other words, 800. So we're going to have 200Q equals 800, and we're going to have a quantity of 4 again, like the diagram suggests. So the number of events there would be if all the families with children go together and decided to provide them would be 4 events, because at that quantity, the marginal benefit for the 100 families equals the marginal cost for the 100 families. Part E says, if the cost of providing the socially efficient quantity of events calculated in B was split evenly across all households, how much would each household have to pay? Okay, so if the cost of providing the socially efficient quantity in events calculated in B was split evenly across all households. So what was the socially efficient quantity of events again? Well, remember it was 6. We worked out in B. It was 6, the point at which the marginal cost equals the marginal social benefit. We're going to produce 6 events. So what is that cost of producing 6 events? Well, sure, it's $1,200 as a marginal cost, but remember that's a marginal cost, that's per extra event. Right? So if you've got 6 events, the total cost is going to be 6 times 1,200, or in other words, 7,200. That's going to be the total cost. So if the total cost is 7,200, and we were splitting that evenly across all households, well, how many households do we have? We've got the 100 with children and the 100 without children. So we've got $7,200 to split between 200 households, and you're going to get 7,200 divided by the 200 households, which I've done previously. You're going to get a total cost per family of $36. So remember, each event costs $1,200. There's 6 events, so we have a total cost of $7,200. But we have 200 households to share them between, so 7,200 divided by 200 is going to give you $36 per household if you split the $7,200 total cost evenly across all 200 households. So finally, part F asks, what would the Lindahl price for each type of household be? Now, to answer this question, you have to remember what the Lindahl price is. And the Lindahl price is is if each person or each consumer pays their marginal benefit at the socially efficient quantity. And you remember the socially efficient quantity here was 6 events. So at the quantity of 6 events, how much is everybody going to pay? Well, each household is going to pay their marginal benefit at that quantity. So in the case of a household with children, the marginal benefit for a household with children is going to be $8 at that quantity of 6, and for a quantity of 6, the marginal benefit for a household without children is going to be $4. Okay, so if you have 100 households paying $8 per event and 100 households paying $4 per event, you add that all up for 6 events and you're going to get the total cost of the event. So we've already calculated that the answer to the question, what would the Lindale price for each type of household be? It's going to be $8 for the households with children and $4 for the households without children at a quantity of 6. And if you add that together, remembering that there's 6 events, so if you have 100 households paying $8 for 6 events, and if you have 100 households paying $4 for 6 events, you're going to get the total cost of the event. So that might be a way that you can check that you've got the right answer. Okay, that's all for now. I'll come up with another video soon. Please feel free to email me if there's anything you'd like me to explain in particular, and I'll try and get it to you this afternoon. Thanks, and good luck in your exam. Bye-bye.